Let's get into a spoiler-free movie review now. I want to talk about Scream 6, and for some reason, I set really high expectations going into this movie. I don't know why. I bought into the hype of the trailer. I bought into the hype of Ghostface having this worn-looking mask, kind of getting that bad taste out of my mouth that Scream 5 had, and thought maybe it would be a little bit more of an elevated horror movie, have a little bit of a different approach and not just be another slasher movie. The idea of it being set in New York City was exciting to me, them getting out of Woodsboro, having the 4 survivors go on to college. And what I said back when I had it in the trailer park is, would it be able to maintain that same level that it did in the trailer throughout an entire 2-hour movie? But before we get into this review, here's just a little bit of the Scream 6 trailer.
This isn't like any other Ghostface.
What is this place?
A shrine.
We've got to lure him in.
We execute him. Hello.
Let's play a game.
You know you're like the 10th guy to try this, right? It never works out for the dipdish in the mask.
Maybe. But there's never been one like me, Gail. I'm something different.
That's why I'm gonna shoot you in the head.
So what we have in Scream 6, we are continuing our requel here. So if you're not familiar with a requel, it is a movie that is both a remake and a sequel, but it contains new materials and tries to keep that same storyline alive, keeps that same continuity. So in essence, Scream 5 was a requel of the original Scream, and Scream 6 is a requel of Scream 2. So this movie continues the theme of it being very meta, very self-aware, and I think to the point in Scream 6 where I feel like this franchise is hurt by its own legacy, holding on to those old characters. You still have Courtney Cox as Gail Weathers in this. You have the references to Neve Campbell's character, the references to David Arquette's character. I think we need to move on from that. Drop all the old nostalgia, and much like I in my 30s need to move on from the 90s, the Scream franchise needs to move on from the 90s. If I have to hear what's your favorite scary movie one more time, I'm gonna lose it. It's not even that great of a line. It's a memorable line, but you don't need to say it in every Scream movie. And the thing is, I actually like the characters in Scream 5 and Scream 6. You have 2 really great leads. They're really great actors. You have Jenna Ortega, who, when this first one came out, Scream 5 that is, I bet most people would have trouble identifying what her name is. But after her having such a big year in 2022, she's now one of the biggest names in horror movies. So I almost feel like she is now attached to this franchise, even though I don't think she'll be continuing to do these movies because her stardom is going to get even far beyond the Scream movies. But you see throughout this entire movie that she's a really great actress, does horror really well. So I think if she wanted to continue in the horror genre, it just fits in so perfectly, like a glove. And then you also have Melissa Barrera, who I just love the representation in between her and Jenna Ortega of having Mexican actresses in a leading big Hollywood movie. So that's inspiring for me to see how you can change throughout the entire franchise, because the storyline in Scream 6 is really like a soap opera. But even with the cheesiness in the storyline, I can still see the talent in both of these leads. And then you also have Mason Gooding, who I think is a really great new actor. I really liked him in Booksmart. And then you have Hayden Panettiere back because she was in Scream 4. So what this entire movie is about is all the 4 surviving members from Scream 5 are back in Scream 6. They have left Woodsboro and are now living in New York City. It takes place about a year after the first one. They're trying to live out their lives. Jenna Ortega's character is trying to completely forget about what happened in Woodsboro and not really make it a part of her identity whatsoever, just trying to be a normal college kid. Her sister, on the other hand, whose dad is Billy Lupus from the very original Scream movie, is still struggling with all these thoughts in her head. She's trying to go to therapy to make sense of all the emotions she felt after she killed the guy in the movie before this, and is having a much more difficult time moving on. What disrupts everything, you have another killing again, and they want to get immediately out of New York City. But then, of course, they run into Ghostface pretty quickly, and their first encounter is actually what you see in the trailer. They're in a bodega, and the rules kind of go out the window because usually Ghostface attacks people one-on-one, doesn't do it in broad daylight. And I felt like this first attack was them trying to be a little bit different. It trying to be a Ghostface like you hadn't seen before. He attacks them right in public, going down the street. And that first little standoff in that bodega was actually pretty good. As the movie progressed from the first and second act, the kill scenes were pretty captivating. They weren't anything entirely different, but they had a little bit more of an edge to them. They moved along a little faster, and the movie got pretty bloody pretty quick, almost like an old school B horror movie from back in the day. So I felt like for a little bit, Ghostface did have a little bit of an edge to him, but I still wasn't buying into the fact that he is a Ghostface like we hadn't seen before, because that about wears off within the 45-hour mark of this. I think where this movie really lost me was with it being a little bit overly meta. Again, I think it's just hurt by its own legacy. It just feels like every Scream movie has this exact same formula, and now at part 6, I'm a little bit over it. The Scream movies to me are almost starting to feel like the Fast and the Furious movies. You kind of know exactly what you're gonna get going into it, and even though you have this expectation of it being completely different, it's really just a lot more of the same. Case in point, Hayden Panettiere's character coming back. She was in Scream 4. Her character, Kirby, is now in the FBI and trying to figure out how all of these killings are connected and how the killer in this movie is leaving behind different Ghostface masks from throughout the years. So I guess that's on me of expecting this movie to be a little bit scarier. The scariest part of Scream 6 for me actually took place in the lobby, having to see all those teenagers, and I could just feel Gen Z judging me, pointing out all my insecurities. Look at this 31-year-old dude with adult braces, sideways crying, laughing emoji using, skinny jean wearing, weather forecast fanatic, looking like he loves a trip to Costco, and I do. So that was the scariest part of this entire movie for me, but I do enjoy that a Scream movie does give me those nostalgic vibes of a 90s slasher movie. That feeling of going to a movie on a Friday night, a packed theater with a bunch of people there just looking to have a good time, laugh at the ridiculous parts, scream during the jump scares, and then talking about the movie as you exit the theater. What was your favorite part? This movie did, in that way, encompass what I love about going to the movies and what made it so memorable going as a teenager. So even though I felt those Gen Z kids judging me, I knew they had the right to do it. They would look back on a night like this of remember the good old times of Scream 6. But I just found that throughout the entire 2 hours, it had a really hard time keeping my attention, and hands down the cheesiest Scream movie I have ever seen. I honestly think they need to honor Wes Craven by letting go of everything we know from the Scream franchise. It seems like they are trying to keep all those things alive in order to keep the legacy of these movies, in order to keep people interested. Let go of all the characters. No more references to Gale Weathers, Sidney Prescott, Officer Dewey. Let's let it all go, and let's let these new actors really shine in a new story. Let's reinvent the Scream franchise. Throw it all out the window. So with that being said, as much as I love a good slasher movie, as much as I love the character Ghostface, this movie just didn't do it for me. I found myself waiting for it to be over. So I would give Scream 6 2.5 out of 5 stab wounds.